Hi everyone, Brian Cox here from Future Vision Research, and this is an impromptu video demonstrating how to upgrade or really install the ROM file onto an EPROM, and then how to update the firmware for the FujiNet onto an ESP32. But instead of doing it through the FujiNet Flasher, it'll still be using that, but instead of the built-in file, how to do it from a daily. And so I'm doing this video here on July 21st, and they just fixed a hiccup in the menu where once it would connect to Wi-Fi, it would stick on that screen and you had to press a key to have it continue onto the FujiNet config. And that update to the firmware, which they have fixed, hasn't been put on a FujiNet Flasher yet. So I'm going to show you how you could go and grab a daily instead of coming from the pull down menu. So let me go ahead and just show you a few resources. I tried to get all the resources, by the way, onto the description for this video so you can watch them there. And then I need to make sure, so I'll have the live chat up so that if you have any questions as I'm going through this, please feel free to throw them into the chat, or you can, of course, post a comment. You can also reach me at sales@fvresearch.com. And of course, my full website is fvresearch.com, where you can find all the production FujiNets available for sale. So back to resources. If we take a look here at the fujinet.online page, you'll see that you do have a download link. And under the download link, that is where you'll find the installer for the FujiNet Flasher program, which you need to update the firmware for your ESP32. But then there's also a link for the dailies. Now the daily, or I should really say nightly builds is really what they call them. The nightly build, which is here, this is the bleeding edge updates for the firmware. And as they point out, when you go to the nightly builds page, there's no guarantee that these builds work. So for the most part, if you're wanting to play with your FujiNet itself, the recommendation is to go with the builds for the main firmware version available through the Firmware Flasher. But if you're helping out on testing or development, you very well will want to go into the nightly builds. And by the way, the FujiNet team is always looking for more help, whether you're a maker or a coder, whatever your interests or skills may be, the FujiNet team is looking for help. Okay, now that's what we need for the FujiNet Flasher to do the firmware. But what about the ROM file itself? Now the ROM, what we do is we use a T48. That's what I use, the T48 programmer. And this will allow us to actually install the EPROM file. And the EPROM, you can see here, goes into the FujiNet device. And by the way, this is a Rev Quad 4, if we want to call it, a Rev0000 FujiNet for CoCo. I have it ready to put the cartridge lid on. Here's the EPROM ready to go, and then of course this is the ESP32, and I'll demonstrate how to do both the EPROM and then the firmware. And you can see it's ready with the cable that will connect into the CoCo as well as the antenna. Now let's take a look with this, with the EPROM builder or the EPROM file. We need to get the ROM file, and that's actually containing various drive wire versions for CoCo's 1, 2, 3, and now for the Dragon also. And the ROM version is selectable by using this dip switch. And then you'll notice, actually, I need to see where I put it. Here it is. I designed a label that will give you a dip switch reference so you know how you should set your switches depending on what device you're actually going to be using your FujiNet on. Now, where do you get the EPROM file? Well, that is linked in the description, but then it is available under GitHub. And let's go ahead and hop over there and I'll show you where that is. When we go to the link, it'll take you to the GitHub repository. And GitHub is where they're making available all of the support files, whether you want to build and design one or you're just getting the support files. They're all available there. So here's GitHub. And I'm actually on the FujiNet hardware /CoCo/ROM page. And this is the file that you want, the CoCo-FujiNet, and you can see it's a 27C512 ROM. And you want to make sure, of course, to get the correct EPROM chip itself. And the links for the resources that you need to build it are also available under FujiNet hardware under CoCo, so you can get those part numbers here. But we want this file right here. And so the way I get the file is I'll click on it here, and then let me move me out of the way. Once I've clicked on the ROM file, I click the download raw file link, and then that saves it to my hard drive. Once I have the ROM file, let me show you what it looks like inside the actual FujiNet, or not rather FujiNet, but rather the EPROM burner. So let me switch here. I'm going to switch here to this camera, and then I need to launch my burner. And this is software that comes with that T48, by the way. And so here we have, back to the desktop. This is the burner program, and there's a lot going on here, but the first thing that you want to do is select the actual IC you're using. And so you can see we have it set here for a W27C512. And I like using the EEPROM, electronically erasable, programmable read-only memory, specifically because these CoCo FujiNets are still in development, and I want to be able to erase the ROM and update a new file if we find that we need to. If they've pushed out an update like they did with the support for the Dragon 3264. Now, once we've selected the IC in the ROM burner program, then we need to open up the ROM file. So I'm going to go up here to load. And so you see up here in the corner, load, and then I'll browse out to the file. And of course I have my support files here, so I have that ROM saved. And the most recent one, by the way, is from February 2025. Now that I've selected that file, I'll go ahead and open it. And then we don't need to change anything here. We can keep, as far as I know, and what I do is I keep everything as a default here, and I'll say okay. Now that I've loaded the ROM file, one of your hints that you have the correct file loaded is you'll notice that you'll see the text for the copyright information here, the extended color basic, etc., etc. And that this is actual raw view of all the addresses inside that ROM file. So I have loaded up the ROM. Now that I have the ROM and I've selected the IC, I can actually burn the ROM onto the EPROM. And what's nice was, back in the day, we had to use the ROMs that you would erase with ultraviolet light, and they had a little window. I don't know if you remember those, but boy, I sure like the EPROMs a lot better. So here's an EPROM. And as with all ICs, it has a pin 1 marked. And so let me just give a quick reminder, since this is a tutorial. When you're working with an IC, you can tell pin 1 because it will have the little dimple on one side. If you don't see a dimple, you will see a little circle next to one pin. And when you're holding that away from you, or if we might say with the dimple or circle on top, then pin 1 is top left. Watch out for these little, I think they're like injection mold or something like that, little circles. If there's a circle in the middle, that is not marking a pin 1. Pin 1 is going to be the dimple at the top or the top left in pin 1. That's important because if we put this in backwards, then we're going to get an error. Now, this is the burner itself, and this has what's called a ZIF, or zero insertion force. So with the handle up, you can see the little grabbies in here, if you can see those moving back and forth. These are nice because they'll grab onto the pins. So I'm going to take this, and it's okay if it's powered up because it's not actually initiating any communication until we do that from the program. So you want to, with this burner, you're putting it so that the side towards the USB cable, that is pin 1. So the little dimple should go on the top. And be sure that when you're using these burners that you actually get it in the top. So like that would not work. So I'll put it up here on the top. And I'm going to check it from a couple of different angles. And then I will move the lever down, and it is now gripping onto the pins. So the chip is ready to go. If we go back to the software, we've loaded up the file. So all we have to do now is hit prog for program. It'll bring up a new dialog box, and you don't need to change anything here. You can see it gives you the picture indicating how you should place the IC, and notice there's a drawing showing you pin 1 of the circle on the left. Okay, and then we'll go ahead and hit program and just let it do its thing. So we can see it's going through, and it doesn't take very long with this size ROM anyways. So it's programming the flash. And we'll let that finish. Once this finishes, then we're going to watch and see that it does a verify where it reads back the information. If I remember right, it should by default actually verify the data as well. Yep, so you can see it actually read the file and confirmed that the file is what it expects it to be. And so it gave us that message succeeded. And I do have the beep activated, so you may have heard the beep over the microphone. That's it. We can go back now. And then now that ROM file is actually installed onto the EPROM. Coming back to the FujiNet, then what you would do is you would actually then just place the EPROM file here, and then you can see on the silk screen right here, there's that little indentation marking pin 1. So that's how we know pin 1 for this IC as well. So that's how you install the ROM file. And it's rare that this is updated. Since I've been following the FujiNet for CoCo project, this has only been updated once from the original setup. And when they first did the ROM, it had support for CoCo 1, 2, and 3. And then the 4th spot was actually a diagnostic file. But now with this new revision, they have it so that it's CoCo 1, 2, 3, or support for the Dragon 3264. Okay. Now, with the FujiNet for CoCo, there are 2 things you have to program. One is the ROM, and then the other is the firmware. So again, as I mentioned from the beginning, let's show you how to do the firmware when you're working with a nightly build instead of going from the menu. Let me go ahead and get my proper USB cable here so that we can actually have a chat with the firmware flasher. So I will plug this right into the USB. I'll plug that in, and then I will go ahead and launch the FujiNet Flasher, and then I'll show you where to get the nightly build again. So we'll go here and grab the flasher. Now remember that the FujiNet.online website has the flasher software that you can install. For a while they had a web-based version of the flasher, but that's now been considered obsolete, and we highly recommend installing the desktop version, and they do have support for Windows, Mac, and Linux as well. All right, so almost there with the flasher. And now that we're done here with the ROM burning program, I'll go ahead and close that out. And then let me bring over the FujiNet Flasher application. So here you can see at the time of making this video, we're on Flasher version 1.5, which is funny because we're also on firmware version 1.5. Now, in order to burn the ROM, or excuse me, in order to burn the firmware, the first thing we'll do from the flasher is choose the COM port, and we'll leave the baud rate by default. And then notice here, these are the official releases that are available from this pull down, and it does have the Tandy CoCo here. If I selected Tandy CoCo and then I select firmware, then notice there's 2 different versions for 1.5. If I select the most recent, there is a baud rate issue that we had to get corrected. And I say we as the collective FujiNet, I was not involved in the coding. I'm the hardware guy mostly. But there's actually a newer fix for version 1.5, and that has that Wi-Fi connection page screen that I mentioned. So we actually don't, at the moment, want to burn from the pull down menu. I want to get the nightly build, and that's what I'm shipping my current FujiNet cartridges with. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to, even just to illustrate, I'll move this back over to select firmware, and we need to get the actual nightly build. To get the nightly build, I have the link in the description, and you would actually go to the nightly release page. And this is where they compile and make ready for us the current firmware version that's in development as they're actively developing this. And we can look through here and make sure we get the correct system. We're of course going to get the firmware for the CoCo. So I will download this nightly, and it just saved it to my download folder. Now that I've downloaded this nightly, do not unzip it. You don't need to. The flasher will actually take care of uncompressing it. So we're going to go here. Instead of using the pull down menu, I'm going to use this custom firmware file. option here. So I'll hit browse, and there it is, browse. And then you notice it's going under the nightly firmware for the one that I'm shipping with. So I'll go ahead and just choose that one. But I have, of course, in my downloads folder here, this is the one that I grabbed before. Okay. And let me just reset that. I'm going to grab this. I'll select that file. And again, you don't need to unzip it. So now in my flasher, it shows that the COM port where it detected the ESP32, baud rate's default. It now says custom firmware file, and I will hit the flash FujiNet firmware button. And then you will see the status go by here in the console, so you can see the actual behavior as it's going along. So we'll go ahead and let this do its thing. It does not take very long to flash the firmware. Once this finishes, I'll actually plug this into a CoCo, we'll demonstrate it and show that it's working. Okay, and reminder, you can get all of the different FujiNets that are production ready, including the CoCo, which is not technically in version 1 yet. We're actually in Rev0000, which means it's so close, ready to release. But that is one that I'm building now, in addition to FujiNets for Atari 8-bits, Apple II and III, and the Coleco Atom. So if you visit fvresearch.com, you can see all of those available. By the way, I highly recommend going to the FujiNet.online screen, and they have a help wanted link, which is available. From that, you can see all the different areas where they're looking for help. Okay, now with this particular firmware version, this is actually where it finishes and completes. It says done, flashing complete. Nothing comes up in the logs here, and we're actually ready to go. So I'm going to unplug my USB cable, and let's switch to overhead, and then let's plug this into a CoCo and see how we do. So I'll go ahead and reconfigure my desktop here a little bit. And I have a CoCo 2 ready to go. We'll need to zoom out a lot more. Okay. Now what I'm doing with my CoCo is I actually am using the RF out, the TV out, and I'm going into a VCR and then using the output from the VCR to go into my capture card. So that's the trick I actually learned from the folks over at Antic. They were talking about how to hook up old hardware and get it into a capture card. So here we have the CoCo ready to go, and I will power it up, and let's watch the power up here. Okay, so after boot, so this is an example where I have a bad connection, really. So if you see this, that's a bad connection, and we're all used to this with cartridges. Oh, I know, actually, not only is it a bad connection, but I did not set the dip switch yet. So I'm glad this happened. So that'd be an example of loading up the wrong portion of ROM for CoCo 2. If I switch to the overhead, let me see if I can zoom in here. And we'll zoom, zoom, zoom. Okay. So you see the dip switches here? Now, remember on my cartridge labels that I designed, I have the cheat sheet for you. We're using a CoCo 2, so pin 1 should be off, pin 2 should be on. So I'll go ahead and set that. Power is off, and now I'm going to plug the cartridge back in, and then let's see how we do now that we've set the right ROM. I'll go ahead and go back to my capture card so you can see here. So you can see immediately it loaded HDB-DOS, and now it's loading the FujiNet config file. As soon as it comes up into FujiNet config, then it's going to look for Wi-Fi. And by the way, when you're building these, it's good to make sure before you do your testing, have that antenna connected. Because we're halfway inside a shielded computer from the 80s, you need that external antenna. And when I say external, I just mean external to the ESP32. So you can see, here it is hanging out right here. That way the antenna is actually outside of the case. Okay, coming back here to the capture card. So I'll connect, don't look at my password. I'm going to switch here while I connect. And let's go ahead and connect that, or enter my Wi-Fi password here. Let's see, I guess I will go ahead and type it in while you're looking at it. It echoes with asterisks, so we're okay. doesn't it? Yes, it does. And let's see if I remember my Wi-Fi password. So here we are, we're working on connecting. Usually I use my Wi-Fi with Future Vision Research, but that's all right, this one's Narnia. So you can see here, now we're at the FujiNet config screen. So if you made it here, you have successfully burned a ROM and burned the firmware, and you're good to go. And so you notice just a quick, I've given a demonstration for the CoCo in my video with the Vint Nerd, so I won't go into that. But you notice if I hit apps, so we are now actually browsing this over the internet. Okay, so in this video, I showed how you can use a T48, the programmer, in order to program an EPROM for the CoCo ROM. And I showed how to use a nightly build to update your firmware on a FujiNet for CoCo. And at the time of recording, I do have these FujiNets for CoCo available for purchase. And remember, I'm constantly building these. So if you happen to see them out of stock, you can purchase them on back order, or at the least, I recommend joining the wait list. That way you'll receive an email as soon as they're back in stock. Well, thank you for watching. And remember, anytime if you have questions, you can find me on Discord, on the FujiNet Discord. You'll see me, Brian Cox, Future Vision Research, or you can email me at sales@fvresearch.com. Thanks, and enjoy your FujiNets.